So, welcome back, everyone, to our journey through the Bible. Before we get into our reading for today, I want to let you know that we're going to take a bit of a hiatus from these devotionals for a couple of weeks as we head through the last days of this year. Next year, we're going to be neck deep in the final details for Christmas Eve and all of the even then possible changes with weather and everything for those services. And then the following week, I'm going to be out of the office between Christmas and New Year's. So check out the details for Christmas Eve worship. Join us for Sunday morning services this Sunday and then again on the 27th. But know that I'll look forward to be back here with you all in these midweek devotionals as we kick off all of the possibilities of 2021 with our first devotional of the new year on January 5th. But as for today, we turn our attention back to Paul and his first letter to the church in Corinth. Our reading in 1 Corinthians yesterday included the 6th chapter, and it was just a few verses in Paul's writing that grabbed my attention for today. This is 1 Corinthians 6, verses 12 through 14, a very brief reading. All things are lawful for me, Paul writes, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Food is meant for the stomach, and the stomach for food, and God will destroy both one and the other. The body is meant not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. Now I'm just going to stop there because Paul mentions here in this brief reading and then continues much more in the full verses that follow. He drives home his particular message on certain moral expectations when it comes to physical intimacy shared with others. And that's a specific question that's a much deeper one for a much different forum and a much different time. What's worthy of our attention, I think, however, is the basis on which he grounds his argument. All things are lawful for me, he says, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Or if I can put it in another way, just because I can doesn't mean I should. It seems such a fundamental concept, one we strive to teach our children from the earliest days of their upbringing, but one we seem to have increasingly lost touch with in that ever-increasingly individualistic nature of our social perspectives. Now, as I get into this, I want to be very clear that I have no intent here or anywhere else to insert myself into debates of science and social policy. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a politician, I'm not a bureaucrat, and I would suggest that we should all be grateful for all of those truths. Those in those fields can engage in their debates and their discernments as they evaluate scientific evidence and delineate public policy. And as one who knows how challenging it has been to be involved in much smaller scale decisions for our church, as well as for some of our wider affiliations and associations, I have a lot of grace and empathy for those who are trying to do their best in this untenable circumstance. What I am, however, is a theologian, a pastor, and a preacher. A person who looks not at the science and economic implications, but one who looks at the heart and the faith of the people who are living through these times. And it's there, to be perfectly honest, that I found myself truly struggling in these past months. So much these days seems to be a debate over freedoms, over perceived excesses of governance, over arguments regarding how the constitutional privileges of one do or do not, or should not impede those privileges of the other. So much these days seems to revolve around the questions of what I should be able to do, what you shouldn't be able to tell me to do, and how much say another can really have over my choices in my life. And believe me, I get all of those arguments. I understand the foundational social principles at play and the difficult questions that pan out in a lot of this, but here's my problem with it all. We've taken those principled debates to such an extreme that they have relegated almost to irrelevance those deeper questions we need to be asking in the face of any crisis. I get the principled questions at hand, but the simple reality is that I am convinced that we need to be far less concerned with whether or not someone can tell us what we shouldn't do than we are with personally figuring out that which we should. We need to be far less worried about standing on some patriotic principle than we are about standing on the principles of God that call us to discipleship. We need to be far less worried about what our rights are and far more focused on figuring out what is right. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. The question is not one of legalistic principle, it's one of discipleship. I understand the challenging nature of so much of what we face as a society, and I am regularly glad that I am not in a position that forces me to be among those making those impossible decisions. I am convinced, however, that as that pastor, as that theologian, as that preacher, that we are echoing this time of Paul in remarkable ways. So worried about our rights and that we increasingly lose track of the faithful responsibility of discerning that which is right. And I am convinced, just as Paul was 2,000 years ago, that reversing that balance would go a long way in creating those new beginnings for which we all long in 2021. Let's be in prayer together. God of grace, of mercy, God who came to us in a child only to take our place on the cross. Help us to claim just a bit of that selfless love in the lives that we lead. Help us, God, to set aside ego and expectation, certitude and concision, that we might stand ever more fully on your litmus test of faith. The question not of what is our right or our privilege, but the question of what is right in the face of your boundless love. For we pray it in his name. Amen. For those of you I may not see in the coming days and weeks, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year. I hope you'll join us on these upcoming Sundays and on Christmas Eve in any of our 3 services at 4, 5:30, and 9. You can check our website at nscchurchwi.org for more details on that, or follow us right here on Facebook. It's all posted there regularly. But I hope you have a wonderful Christmas, a blessed New Year, and I'll see you back here on January 5th. Thanks for being with me.